Madagascar Interlude. Jimmy Christian sat upright with a sudden start. Somewhere in the darkness of the Madagascar jungle, he had heard a scream, sharp and desperate, the kind that pulled a man instantly from sleep. For a moment he listened carefully. The jungle was silent again except for the slow drip of moisture from the heavy leaves above. Strange place to hear a scream, Jimmy muttered to himself. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The jungle around them was thick and suffocating. Even in the middle of the night, the heat hung in the air like a blanket. Jimmy checked his watch. 2:35 in the morning. He had been asleep for barely 4 hours. They had marched nearly 15 miles through jungle that day, cutting their way through vines and brush while carrying heavy packs. Nearby, the rest of the expedition slept. Toby Sanders, Agut, the native guide, Vale Jenkins, and Petray. All 4 men appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Jimmy frowned. If someone had screamed, Agut should have heard it. The jungle guide had sharper hearing than anyone. Yet Agut hadn't stirred. Jimmy was still wondering about it when a twig snapped somewhere in the bushes nearby. Instantly, he became alert. Was it a wild animal prowling near the camp? Or something worse? Slowly, Jimmy slid his pistol from beneath his blanket and listened. Madagascar was no place to take chances. The British war effort had pushed into the region, and enemy forces were rumored to be scattered throughout the island. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch cracked again. Jimmy reached over and shook Vale Jenkins. "Wake up," he whispered, "and listen." Jenkins rolled over groggily, reaching instinctively for his gun. "What's the trouble?" "Quiet," Jimmy whispered. For several seconds, the 2 men listened. Another twig snapped. Closer this time. Jenkins suddenly lifted his pistol and fired toward the sound. The jungle exploded with crashing branches as something large fled through the brush. Within seconds, the entire camp was awake. "What happened?" Toby demanded. Jimmy explained quickly. Jenkins shrugged. "Probably just a wild beast prowling around camp," he said. "Maybe," Jimmy replied, "but that gunshot could carry for miles tonight." A gut had already reached the same conclusion. "We must leave," the guide warned quietly. "Enemy here shot. We move now." There were grumbles from the group. None of them wanted to crawl through the jungle before dawn, but within minutes the expedition was moving again, slipping silently through dripping jungle brush. For hours they pushed forward. Eventually they reached a small clearing and decided to make camp. Late that afternoon, 2 French aircraft passed overhead. They flew too high to clearly spot the camp, but Jimmy knew the danger was real. "If those planes report our position," he told Jenkins quietly, "we could be in serious trouble." Jenkins nodded grimly. "I suspect they'll try to capture us rather than attack." Unfortunately, he was right. The next day, while Jimmy and the others were mapping a jungle trail, a group of armed soldiers suddenly emerged from the trees. They were French troops. Within seconds, the expedition was surrounded. Their weapons were taken, and the men were marched north through the jungle. By evening, they arrived at a small military outpost. The prisoners were locked inside a wooden cell. Later that night, a decorated French general arrived. He looked at them through the bars. "You have been mapping jungle routes for the British," he said calmly. Jimmy protested immediately. "We are neutral explorers." The general smiled coldly. "We have proof otherwise." Then he delivered the sentence. At dawn, they would be shot. When the general left, Jimmy turned to Jenkins. "Well," he said quietly, "that settles it. They intend to execute us." Jenkins slammed his fist against the wall. "They won't get away with it." Jimmy looked around the small wooden cell. It was sturdy, impossible to break through without tools. But then he noticed something, a length of bamboo. Quickly he began working. Using a lace from his boot, Jimmy fashioned a simple bow. The bamboo splintered into crude arrows. Jenkins stared. "You planning to start a war with that thing?" Jimmy grinned. "Not exactly." A small fire was built using scraps of wood. After an hour of careful work, the wooden bars of the window were burned enough to weaken them. Soon the men crawled outside. Jimmy placed a flaming arrow in the bow and aimed toward the enemy ammunition store nearby. The arrow struck. Seconds later, a massive explosion rocked the camp. Amid the chaos, the prisoners ran into the jungle. By dawn, they had reached the coast. They were free. It had been a close escape, but Jimmy Christian had survived again, thanks to quick thinking and a little jungle ingenuity.